joining us today, welcome to my fantastic guests, His Excellency Paul Kabuswe, Minister of Mines and Minerals Development Zambia, Kimberly Harrington, Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for Energy Diplomacy, U.S. Department of State, Frank Giustra, President and Chief Executive Officer, Fiora Group of Companies, and Chairman of the International Crisis Group, as well as Agesan Rajagopal, partner at McKinsey. Round of applause, please. I know it's 5 p.m. It is 5 p.m. and we have a lot to get through.
Yeah.
A lot to get through. And we don't have much time, so I'm not going to give sort of a rundown on the topic because I think we understand what this is, right? It's is Africa missing an opportunity to develop? But I'm going to flip this slightly. And I think both questions are relevant. The one I want to ask is, has Africa been given the opportunity to develop? I think for those of you that know how much abundance the continent has in terms of critical minerals, of commodities, and that has been exploited for many decades through very bad deals. So I want to start with you, Minister. I want you to tell me, which question would you be asking today? Are we missing an opportunity to develop, or has Africa been given an opportunity to develop?
Thank you very much, Elaine, for that very important question. When you say, has Africa been given the chance to develop, by who? That would be the question that one would want to ask. So I think that we need to analyze Africa as it stands right now. You know, I'll speak also from the perspective of my country, Zambia, where I come from. Has Africa been given a chance to develop by nature? Yes. Why do I say so? Africa is endowed with massive resources, huge resources. A lot of countries in Africa are endowed with, including my country, Zambia. When we talk about all the critical minerals that we are talking about today, they are found in Zambia. But then you go further and ask to say, the people that have been running or that have been leaders in Africa, have they given Africa a chance to develop? Some yes, some no. But even the people that come to invest in Africa, have they given Africa a chance to develop? Generally, you would say the answer is no, because when you look at Africa today and its population, with the resources that it's endowed with, I think that it hasn't been given enough chance to develop. And I think it takes two to tango. Partly, it's the kind of investment probably that has come into Africa in terms of how do these investments are applied, or how are people able to do these agreements, investment agreements? Have they resulted in leaving a fair share to the countries that, are endowed with these resources? And then the leaders that receive these resources, have they applied them correctly? So those are some of the issues I think that we need to interrogate. But I think right now, Africa is waking up to that fact. And I'm sure that is why this question is coming up. Has Africa been given a chance to develop? Yes, now the leadership, most leadership that are there, particularly for our country, Zambia, I think that the leadership that is there is waking up to that reality to say we have to have win-win situations. We have to give chance to these minerals to benefit its people, because these countries are endowed with these minerals for purposes of benefit to the people that are domiciled in this country.
Exactly, and frankly, it's all about industrialization at the end of the day. You want to refine as much as possible and not export raw and then bring it back in. And as you say, with 54 countries, so much mineral resources, why don't we have more industrialization? You could put it down to the power issue, lack of power. You can put it down to so many things. There's a plethora of things. But we're sitting in a very different space right now, and there's agency in Africa. And let me tell you, the conversations I'm having is that there is a big push to industrialize as much as possible. Deputy Assistant Secretary, I want to come to you, and I think it would be remiss of me to not get into the competitive environment right now on the African continent, where China has had first mover advantage. It is absolutely dominating. Russia is making a big play. You're seeing other countries looking at it very seriously. From the US perspective, do you believe that Africa is the solution to sorting out your supply chains that you will need in terms of what the demand is required? And are you willing to sign the good deals? on the continent?
Great. Well, thank you. Excellent question. Certainly from a U.S. perspective and from my perspective, covering a broad range of energy issues, energy security, energy access, and the critical minerals space, we are hugely optimistic about the opportunities that exist to really create a critical minerals ecosystem that does exactly what the minister was talking about, giving back to the community, creating good paying jobs, creating some opportunities for higher end processing of minerals. And there is just a world-class opportunity in Africa right now. I do want to just clarify, so I have lived on the continent for about 5 years in both sub-Saharan and North Africa. And of course, you know, using the term Africa, you have 54 very different countries, right? So I think, you know, you don't want to make sweeping generalizations about an entire continent, but if we are going to talk very holistically, I am hugely optimistic about both the opportunities we have to form partnerships, public-private partnerships, to get great investments that hold up to the ESG standards that the people on the continent are looking for, that create jobs, that help communities, and that reach some of our global energy security goals of diversifying critical mineral supply chains. So I am very optimistic that there are huge things that the continent is going to be doing in this space. I think when you look at the demographics and the economics of Africa, 1/4 of the world's population is going to be in Africa by 2050, and I'm very optimistic that big things are going to be happening.
All right, fantastic. Frank, I want you to jump in here. There's a lot to get through. But I want to talk about what's going to happen in 5 days. That is, President Trump comes into office.
Is it 5 days already? Okay.
It's the 20th, right? 20th of January. So, and you know, I asked this question earlier in terms of what the U.S.-Africa policy is going to be under President Trump and what that would look like. And I know you've got some thoughts about this, so tell me. And you know, to the point, China's first mover advantage and what that means for the United States and whether they can catch up.
Well, the U.S. is late to the party. Let's just establish that first and foremost. China's had an over 20-year head start and has done an incredible job, really, of investing in infrastructure in Africa. What happens when the new administration comes in is anybody's guess, because as we all know, President Trump is a very unpredictable character. But I will say this, which is going to be an interesting thing to watch. He hasn't been very kind in his remarks about African countries, his personal beliefs. He's not really into clean energy. That's not his thing, and he doesn't believe in electric vehicles. So how that plays out...
Elon Musk wouldn't be happy about that, by the way.
What's that?
Elon Musk wouldn't be very happy about that.
Well, who knows what Elon is thinking. He's another unpredictable character. But I think that it's going to be interesting to see. I mean, America does need access to these critical minerals. And like I said, they're late to the party. You've got almost the entire planet looking at Africa now, the Gulf countries. The Russians are in there through the Wagner Group. You've got Turkey, you've got Egypt, all these countries competing for investment opportunities in Africa. And America, you know, in many parts of Africa is not as welcome as, say, other countries. And with under Trump, it'll be interesting to see. I think reality will set in. And, you know, whether the people that surround Trump will have to convince him that he's going to have to play a major role if they're going to secure these minerals. Otherwise, they'll have to look in other places around the world, like Latin America, but China's already there as well, investing in infrastructure. It's going to become very competitive, very competitive.
Did you want to respond?
Yeah, I'd just like to add a point, and you know, on a couple things. I'd say, first of all, looking at all the indications of the incoming administration, including our nominee for Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, as a senator, he has been very focused on critical minerals supply chains. In fact, he authored a bill in Congress. Our incoming national security advisor, Mike Waltz, has also been very, very focused on the issue of critical minerals. So I do think that we have some indications that critical minerals are really seen as economic security and as a part of national security, and that's really foundational. We're in a world where that is the case. I would also say on America being late to the party, look, I mean, I think in this space, we very much realize that we need partnerships, and that has been our principle. America can't go it alone, nor do we want to. So we have been working through the Minerals Security Partnership, which the State Department launched in 2022, working with 13 other countries that are consumers of minerals, plus the EU. We now have 15 members who are Mineral Security Partnership Forum members, including Zambia. And what we're looking to do with these partnerships is bring in high-level investment of companies with de-risking from development banks from all of those countries of our members to try to get the best types of investment in the critical minerals sector that meet really the demands of the people on the continent and help us meet the broader goal of diversifying critical mineral supply chains. We can't do it alone. I would never pretend that we could, and we are all in on these partnerships to meet those goals.
I mean, but the numbers do speak for themselves. China has a very big hold on what we're seeing on the continent, and you know that's leverage in a big way. But the man that perhaps could give us some insights onto what's happening with potential deals being signed is Agasan. Of course, he's from McKinsey. And I want to ask you this. What are clients asking for right now when it comes to Africa? Where are these clients from? Which countries? Give us some insights.
Well, they're global, so from all parts of the world. So
the US, Europe, China?
Yeah. I think what they're asking about is how can we access the right opportunities and what role can we play and how do we make sure that this actually can be successful. And what we're discussing with them is a couple of things. So first of all, there's no one Africa. And we talked 54 countries.
Exactly.
And I think that's one of the challenges. We just talk about this one big continent, but you actually have to look at country by country, region by region. In some cases, you have to look at two neighboring countries and a region that's integrated rather than the whole country itself. So that's one thing. Start with there's no one Africa. Let's look at each area, each community, and what's needed to actually make it successful. The second thing is focus on competitiveness, because that's when you start to really look at what's the thing that's going to unlock this. Of course, the mines are amazing, great resources, great grades, good scale, can be really good low-cost assets, but what else is needed to make this competitive? And that's where it's about the infrastructure, what gets it to the market, etc. And the downstream also, we have to look at that from a competitiveness angle and not just...
Is there interest in downstream right now?
There is huge interest across quite a few of the commodities. Absolutely, there's big interest in that, mainly in a quest to diversify on the downstream. And here the point is, I think everybody would look at the business case and say, well, that's something you have to look at because downstream on its own is not the same in terms of returns, margins, all of that compared to mining, which is quite attractive over the long term. But I think the other thing we discuss is what is the other impact that has on the economy? Because it also brings in technology, skills, additional skills, more advanced skills for the countries, and that's also important.
Okay, Minister, I want you to jump in here.
Yeah.
When it comes to Zambia, you have a really strong relationship with China.
Yes.
You also refine copper. And copper, by the way, now is a critical mineral. It wasn't, a few years ago. Now copper is back in vogue in a very big way. I want to ask you this simply. What kind of partnerships are you looking for? And when does it make sense? Because, again, from the competitiveness, you're seeing now, I frankly think there's going to be a scramble for African critical minerals. Who's going to sign the best deals? Who's going to be able to secure those supply chains and so forth? So what do you look for?
So what we look for, Elaine, in partnerships, number one, we underline win-win. That must be underlined. We do understand as a country that mining is capital intensive. Mining, is a long-term investment, which we appreciate. So when we are partnering, we want to emphasize a win-win situation, a relationship that is mutually respectful, not a relationship of slave-master arrangement. In that relationship, we want to really look at four things, the four pillars that we look at. We want affordable capital invested, and then we want, value addition, proper partnerships, and then we want to invest downstream. Zambia has been mining a land for the past 100 years, and at this moment, we've reached a point where we are able to go to copper cathodes, for example, in the copper sector. But we want to go beyond that. And we realize that we can get more value by going downstream. And every partnership that we are now engaged in, including the ones that we've recently done, one of the things embedded in those agreements is the fact that we have to agree on value addition. If there is
it easy to seal that deal?
Come again?
Is it easy to seal that deal to get value addition?
Yes, it is. It is, and it is not. It depends on how you negotiate with potential investors.
Is there appetite to keep that processing, that final processing, in Zambia?
There is serious appetite, because there is serious appetite for copper today, for example.
Yeah.
And we have to leverage that in terms of, the kind of negotiations that we are going into. So really the appetite to go downstream is there for all the deals that we've signed so far. And anybody that is coming in, we are emphasizing that point, because when you go into a negotiation, Elaine, there are things that you are looking for. There are also things that the investor is looking for. So you have to meet somewhere and agree to say, okay, here we agree, here we don't agree. But the issue of downstream investment is a non-compromise issue. You have to do it.
And that's going to result in the development we're talking about.
Indeed.
Frank, I want you to jump in here. When we were discussing about the topic, because you're part of the International Crisis Group, you want to talk about some of the conflicts that we're seeing in certain parts of the continent, specifically the Sahel. We're actually seeing political uncertainties, in parts of West Africa. We're worried about Sudan. There are a lot of issues that are going on. Does that scare away investment in those particular parts of the continent? And does that inadvertently raise the cost of capital? Because perceptions of risk, they stick like glue. And I have seen this happening on the African continent. If something's happening far away on one end, it could reflect somewhere else.
And in many parts of America, they think Africa is a country. And so when they see problems in one part of Africa, they kind of paint the rest of it with the same brush. I think one of the biggest risks facing the opportunity for Africa to develop, if that's the subject here, is the potential for conflict. You've got all these geopolitical players, regional and global powers, competing. And now there are areas where conflict is happening, and people are taking sides, and there's influence happening on all sides, some negative, some positive. And what I'm afraid of is that the new set of external players make the same mistake that the old colonial masters made before. And the opportunity here is to develop Africa in a conflict-free manner. And I think it's the responsibility not only of the local leaders, but also of the foreign external actors. And as you said, it's happening across the Sahel, it's happening in the Horn of Africa. Sudan is the worst humanitarian crisis on the planet today, and the Central African Republic has the highest mortality rate for children. I mean, you've got all of these issues, poverty, et cetera. And I think as the world scrambles to secure its critical mineral needs, I think that a tragic mistake and a missed opportunity will be to not lift the African people up. And this will be the job of everybody involved, the leadership, external players, and mining investors. I think that's really going to be critical to not make the same mistakes that were made before.
Can I jump in here? Yeah, I mean, I would just say those comments really bring me back to what you said, which I think I was trying to say the same thing, but you articulated it much better. We need to think more about regions in Africa, right? Like clusters. We're not talking about, it's clearly not one country. It's one continent that is very different and very diverse. And I think investors, when they are looking at, midstream and other types of processing, they are really looking at what sort of regional clusters have the right investment climate, but also have the power, electricity, interconnections, which is an essential part of moving up the value chain, right? You need, if you're going to be doing really heavy processing, you need to have reliable sources of power, and oftentimes that means interconnectors with your neighbors, and oftentimes that means you need to have backup generation. You might need to tap into hydro of a neighbor. You might need to have potentially a natural gas line with a neighbor. And the interconnectivity issue is really important for investors. That's one of the reasons we've really been focused on the Partnership for Global Infrastructure and Investment, particularly the Libido Corridor, and trying to galvanize investment in the Copper Belt to create more synergies among countries in the Copper Belt to really be able to develop and export the many minerals along that line. And I think we've galvanized an incredible amount of partnerships towards that end, an incredible amount of financing.
Can I emphasize one point? I think that I want to agree to the fact that as we look at whatever we are looking at, and that is why this question came, to say, has Africa been given a chance? We have an opportunity as a globe to, I think, correct the wrongs of the past where people were left behind and minerals were mined. This is the time. And I want to disagree with one of the panelists just before we came, who mentioned that we were not talking about industrialization except the money that we get from the investments. That is not correct. Because if I want to industrialize, Elaine, I will industrialize with the resources that I'll get from the mineral wealth that I'm endowed with. When I call somebody as a partner, what I'm saying is that I have the land, I have the resource. What I may not have is the capital to be able to mine out that resource so that I industrialize my nation to create jobs for our people. In fact, creating a mine itself is industrialization because that is an industry that will create jobs for our people. And there will be now offshoot industries from that mine. In fact, like for Zambia, we are anchored on the mining sector. But most of the industries that we have been supported by actually the mining of the minerals that we are endowed with. So really, as we do everything that we are doing, we talk about the Libido Corridor, how we'll pull material. You talk about the partnership, the downstream investment. At the back of our minds, we must have uplifting of people's lives. How do we do that? It's industrialization. How do you industrialize? It's the wealth or the resources that you are getting from the minerals that you are endowed with. That's how you industrialize. So the starting point or the key, sign correct deals.
Thank you. Yes, exactly. Sign correct deals. I've seen this time and time again. I mean, even commodities being given off as collateral to loans, bad loans. And by the way, it actually comes down to very expensive capital.
Yeah.
And that's why some countries are going to and signing bad deals because they have no other choice or no other option. So let's move this forward because I heard this comment on the industrialization part that African governments don't actually have an appetite to industrialize. Through my experience, I've got a show called Connecting Africa. This is what we talk about constantly. There is a mega push to industrialize in a very big way. And we understand that the power issue is holding the continent back. As a whole, by the way, there's energy poverty across the board. Even South Africa is battling, even though it's the most industrialized. So let me ask you this, Minister. Right now, does Africa as a whole, all the regions, have an actual chance of developing? And does it come down to these deals?
Yes, we have an opportunity right now because of the demand on critical minerals. I think that maybe God would have created this scenario for us so that Africa can...
So Africa has the advantage.
It has the advantage.
To push specific deals.
And let me talk about this issue of energy and power shortages and all. For us as Zambia, we are taking that as an opportunity because we've been predominantly hydro. So we are saying it's now an opportunity for us to invest in other sources of energy. I want to tell you that with what we've put in place, in the next few years, Zambia will have surplus in terms of energy. We'll be able to manage the demand that probably the 3 million tons vision that we have will demand a lot of energy, and I think that we'll be able to meet that depending on what we put in place in terms of investment.
Please export some of that power to South Africa. Power cuts are a problem.
We will.
I guess someone who lives in South Africa can tell us all about that. You've got some examples of some really good deals and things of industrialization. Botswana stands out for me because of Botswana. I visited the Jwaneng mine. I've seen bringing back cutting and polishing of diamonds to Botswana was a really big thing. But tell me how good deals look and whether they're replicable. We can scale those.
Yeah, I think that's a good example that you mentioned. And what's good about it was long term. So it was, that's been a more than 30-year, 40-year deal that's really helped to build the economy and move the country from low income to middle income. So long-term vision. By the way, that one as well also included downstream in terms of sorting and the trading side of it. I think another one that is a good example, which brings the theme of integration, is what South Africa did on the platinum side, because it was taking the further steps beyond refining. There was refining, but also beyond that to the auto catalyst production in the country. And that was a kind of overall, I don't know if you can call it a deal, but let's call it a cluster that brought together the international chemicals players that were doing the next step, and then also linked into the automotive players. So sounds complex, but it's actually quite simple because it had a bit more of the end-to-end part of it. So I think there's some good examples. Another one that's interesting to see is some of the gold refinery examples. I think one interesting one is in Ghana, where they built this new gold refinery. It's still early days, and gold refineries are challenging economics generally. But what's interesting about it is the intention to actually bring in and consolidate some of the artisanal mines and the smaller mines, which will help in terms of professionalizing the sector.
Mm-hmm. Brilliant. Frank, did you want to?
I just want to touch on what the minister spoke about, and I agree. I think it's very important that countries cut intelligent deals at the outset. But there's a flip side to that as well that we have to be aware of, which scares away investment, and that's when countries change the goalposts. Mining requires a lot of upfront capital investment, and literally billions of dollars go into some of these projects, and you can't, as a mining company, move your asset across borders if things go wrong. So once you're invested, you're at the mercy of the government that's in power, and too often deals are changed, the goalposts are changed. And I think that we need to find it's a delicate balance that has to be played between intelligent deals that are cut, but then are stuck to. Because the mining business is a boom and bust business, and the boom periods are sometimes relatively short. And so you have intense capital going in, and then you have to get those returns over many, many years. And we're seeing too often in countries around the world, and some in Africa, where they're changing the deals after the investment is made, and the company's held hostage. And in some cases, like in the Sahel, recently, you're seeing deals change at gunpoint. And, Barrick has had this terrible situation in Mali, and obviously we are seeing, governments taking control of mining assets in other countries like Niger. And this sort of behavior scares away capital. So again, it's a delicate balance.
It absolutely
cut intelligent deals, but then stick to them.
But again, Africa's a very large place with 54 countries, and we've seen some bad deals being signed, and then when you want to renegotiate those deals, suddenly those African governments are, the problem. The point is to sign good deals from the get-go, and I know the African Union, together with the African Continental Free Trade Area Secretariat, are doing some work on trying to alleviate that. But Minister, I wonder if you've got a response to this, where you're seeing, I guess the point is policy continuity.
Of course.
Investors come, they know in Zambia, this is the policy, this is what's happening.
So for us, we have said to ourselves that Zambia has one big asset, which is its peace. It guarantees protection of investment with whoever comes. And then we've also studied the fact that for you to be a competitive mining jurisdiction, you need predictability and stability within the economy. And that we have done. We have looked at best practices and benchmarked, and made sure that when somebody comes to invest, mining one is investing $1 billion, $2 billion, $10 billion. That's a huge amount of money. It requires that that person is feeling safe in that jurisdiction, is also feeling that tomorrow the goalposts won't be shifted. There will be, you know, as was agreed. And we, as a government, we are trying our level best to make sure that that is achieved so that there is a win-win with the investor.
Let me ask you this. Are you working with the United States?
Yes, we are.
Fantastic.
Yes,
okay, so
we are.
yeah.
Yes, mentioned he's actually Zambia is part of the Mineral Security Partnership Forum, part of the Libido Corridor Initiative. So we're working together on some copper projects and hope to continue to do so.
You know, I've got 3 seconds left to take the liberty to ask this. Do you think this is the moment where we will see true industrialization of the continent because it offers the critical minerals that the world needs, that Africa will be the place?
I think with what we are seeing now, including this Future Minerals Forum, the minds of the people, I think that we are heading somewhere.
Africa is the place to be very quickly. Yes,
I mean, I think there's many opportunities for people across the continent to benefit tremendously from critical minerals, including from refining and processing.
Is this the
Absolutely.
moment?
I hope so.
You hope so, huh? I guess then.
Yes, because not only do we have the critical minerals, but also at the right quality, which is very important from an ESG perspective. So hugely the right time.
And guess what? We have the people.
Indeed.
Indeed.
The best resource of all.
Indeed.
Ladies and gentlemen, please round of applause for my fantastic guests. Thank you so much.
Thank you.